Right, hey guys, how are we doing? Back another video from Annie News. We've got another cut content video for ReZero Season 3. Nearly said Season 4. Season 3, Episode 4. Goddamn, Garfiel is going through some stuff in this one, isn't he? I mean, like, he's just had the whole thing with his mum. Then he finds out it is his mom. And then the girl, little cat girl person, oh my god, tries to protect him, and oh, Jesus Christ. But let's see what was left out from this episode. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of characters and stuff going on, and I'm intrigued.
There's a lot happening in ReZero right now.
Yeah.
Amelia and Felt have been captured, Priscilla and Otto are nowhere to be found,
Oh yeah, Otto encountered that. Oh, I hope he's okay.
Garfiel has to help his mother find his siblings, then Subaru and the others need to free the city from its captors. They're all events going on simultaneously, and that doesn't even include the smaller storylines of the side characters. So, while Season 4 does switch things up with the way the story is presented, the way it bounces around...
Season 4? Season 3, isn't it? Season... Yeah, Season 3. Aha! He messed up as well! Anyway.
Actually kind of works. It makes sure we're relatively updated with the status of everyone, all while maintaining focus on that bigger overarching conflict. This does come at the cost of some additional depth though, so where we should have gotten more info on Capella, Al, and some others, we instead kept our focus on the main cast. It leaves quite a bit to cover in just one episode of cut content. So, rather than do one long half-hour video, this one will be split into parts.
Ooh.
First, the extended meeting and Garfiel's conflict, then after that, the operation and how it really went down. Both have some pretty interesting details you're probably going to want to know about.
Cool.
Episode 54, Part 1, Witch Cult Disaster Response Headquarters,
Okay.
covering chapters 3 and 4 from Volume 17 of the light novel. With Capella's name being revealed as the culprit behind everything, Subaru was both surprised and unsurprised. Surprised because Capella was an archbishop he's never heard of before, and unsurprised because knowing her identity was a given at this point. If there was one golden rule these deranged archbishops always followed, it was the fact they always introduced themselves before doing anything.
Yeah, they really do, don't they? It's like a weird courtesy that they give. But then there was that moment where it was like, just don't let them know your name, because they're not making them easy to track and everything. And then Subaru's like, oh, shit.
It was as if they all had this desire to stand in the spotlight. Now, there were a few logistical questions Subaru wanted answered, like why was it that a business was being used as a disaster response headquarters? Based on what he knew about companies in general, it wasn't normal for them to turn their place of business into a shelter like this. Well, as it turns out, the main reason is because the building was owned by Kiritaka. The person Subaru didn't really think too fondly of was actually a lot more considerate than he may have thought. Reason being that, as the leading member of the city's Council of 10, it only made sense to look out for the people he was responsible for.
I don't know why, but it always sounds cool when you put a number behind something. And it's like the Council of 10, like the I don't... I just thought of, I don't know why, I just thought of the Venture Brothers, the Guild of Calamitous Intent. That doesn't even have numbers in it, but that was a comedy. Anyway, sorry for distracting myself.
He was actively assisting with
The Guild of Calamitous Intent.
the evacuation himself, all while taking time to properly dispatch those who could assist even further. So, if even Krush and Wilhelm are vouching for his character, then Subaru knew Kiritaka might not be as bad as he thought. In fact, if not for Kiritaka and his quick decision to turn his business into a makeshift field hospital, there was a good chance Felix wouldn't have been able to save Subaru's leg at all. So, it was in that way that Subaru actually kind of owed him one.
Right.
Al had even gone so far as to refer to this as lucky, but for Subaru he knew luck had nothing to do with it. If it did, then Subaru felt he wouldn't have died multiple times to get to this point. To him, he just wasn't the type to believe in fortune anymore. He had stopped doing so ever since the day he was isekai'd here.
I suppose so. Yeah, I mean, like, you die and come back and you'd be like, that's a miracle, but then really it's a curse.
The group then went on to discuss the people not present, starting with the most obvious, Priscilla. As a royal princess candidate herself, you'd think Al would be more worried about her safety, but in actuality he wasn't too concerned at all. Yes, he was a bit scared, but that was mostly for himself since Priscilla was gonna punish him for sure. There was no way she wouldn't, considering his lack of presence during such a crucial time like this. Julius and Ricardo had escorted Felix here, then immediately left to go check up on other shelters. Their plan was to contact Felix should they find anyone who needed his help, also they could save at least one more person. The whole thing made perfect sense to Subaru, except for the part about contacting Felix. Reason being that in a world where the total count of cell phones was 1, the conversation mirror media was quite the surprise for Subaru. I mean, with the way Felix pulled it out as if it was the most common thing to exist, that even went to catch me off guard.
Yeah, like, technology's not a thing, but it's magic, isn't it? So when it's something that resembles it, it's a bit like, oh, okay, they can do that.
As it turns out, though, the mirror was actually a spoil of war from last year's battle against Betelgeuse. It was something Anastasia had been keeping ever since. Its full capabilities allowed it to connect to 3 other mirrors just like it, so all in all it was quite the useful tool for communication. Now, Otto's whereabouts wasn't too much of a concern for Subaru, since when it came to staying alive, he was second to none.
Yeah, Otto's a survivor, man. He knows what he's doing.
When all was said and done, Subaru truly believed he was the last person to slip up in a situation like this.
Yeah, but he did run into that... Oh.
It wasn't something he'd willingly admit out loud, but that was the glowing opinion Subaru had of him. This is actually pretty similar to the feelings Al has towards Priscilla, since just like Subaru with regards to Otto, Al trusted she could take care of herself too. It just wasn't something he was very open to admitting either. Now, when it came to the others in the Amelia camp, Subaru believed Garfiel was probably fine too, and Patrash was sharp enough to take care of herself.
Yeah, when it comes to Garfield, you would kind of think, you know what, dude can transform into a giant cat, very muscular, he's vicious, he could fight, he'll be fine.
She was currently safe at an inn settled up alongside Frufu. The one party whose absence was a bit worrying though was Felt and her missing knight Reinhard. The last anyone had seen from either of them was Felt running after the person who ruined their mornings. It was a thought that caused Wilhelm to tense up a bit. Obviously, if Reinhardt was with her though, then her safety wasn't really anything to worry about. So after every absentee was thought about and accounted for, the only wildcards were Priscilla and the songstress. There was no telling where the 2 of them could have run off together. Getting back to the main problem at hand, the archbishops were essentially holding 100,000 people hostage.
God damn.
As one of the 5 largest cities in Lagunica, it made evacuating everyone almost impossible. Sure, they could technically do it by walking right out the main gate, but with an enemy-controlled control tower right next to it, being discreet just wasn't feasible. It was a dire situation.
There's
Subaru
no
was
sneaky out of
calm
this
about,
one.
since only a year ago he would have been freaking out about saving Amelia. As someone who's grown from his experiences though, he now knew losing his cool wouldn't save anyone. His last outburst already caused Amelia to get abducted, so that was a mistake he was desperately trying to avoid again. It was an admirable notion that really resonated with Wilhelm. For some personal reason or the other, he was very invested in helping Subaru and Amelia. So while Wilhelm's support came as quite the comfort for Subaru, for Al, who was watching the whole...
Oh. Alright, Al's covering Subaru there, but Wilhelm, look at him. Looks like a beast. So cool.
Interaction go down, he seemed interested for a completely different reason. He didn't say a word the entire time it was happening, but the way he stared made it seem like he wanted to say something. It was enough to get Subaru to ask what it was. Al didn't have any reason in particular, but he did say how he was thinking Subaru was pretty twisted. It was a vague response that came with all sorts of implications. Subaru couldn't figure out what those were right now, but the off-putting nature of it made Subaru more wary of Al. This brings us now to the discussion about Capella, where quite a bit more was given for her backstory. Not the Capella we know as the Archbishop though, but instead the Capella who Lust stole her name from.
Oh.
So, aside from succumbing to illness at a very young age, it turns out her death wasn't mourned by anyone. Where normally a state funeral would be held and a formal ceremony put on, neither...
Isn't that the thingy from Overlord that did the song at the end of the last season? Oh my god, trailer for the movie looks good for Overlord. I really hope they do a screening around here. Anyway.
Were done since the people had no desire to. The excuse was that the times were too dire, but in actuality it was simply because no one liked her.
Fair enough.
The processions, which were hers by right, were completely ignored due to the cruel sadistic nature that she was known for. Apparently, wherever she went, an unfathomable darkness always seemed to follow. It's for this reason her death was even kept secret for a while, and that to Wilhelm will forever be one of the kingdom's greatest indignities. It clearly wasn't something he was comfortable talking about. At least now everyone knew Lust couldn't be the old Capella, so to Wilhelm it was likely she was just trying to harass those who did know her. Perhaps to invite suspicion or simply lay mistrust, but
It's like Obito invading Konoha, saying he's Madara, and everyone like, wow, that's crazy, Madara's back. But then he's not really, it's
either way, it
similar.
was a disrespectful
Yeah.
act that clearly intended to disparage the royal family. Something Krusch and Wilhelm weren't very willing to just accept. The one who was affected by it the most, though, was actually Felix, who was now very visibly angry. It was rather rare for anyone to see him like this, but the expression Felix made now was one of pure, genuine anger. As a royal guard whose sole purpose was to protect the royal family, such disrespect was desecration of the highest order. That was the apparent reason for his rage on the surface, but there was something else too clearly bothering him. Something that didn't have anything to do with fealty or the kingdom. Now, there wasn't any point trying to understand the witch cult's intentions, since trying to do so was likely just a waste of time. The most important—
They do seem so odd, and then they're not working together, but they are working together, and arguing. Oh my god.
important thing right now was figuring out how to navigate this. They knew what they wanted and what was at risk, so all they needed to do now was figure out the best path forward. The whole thing was actually so out of character for the witch cult, since to see them use hostages as a means to an end, well, that was a level of logic and rationality Subaru just wasn't accustomed to for them. As for what they wanted, the witch's bones were something Subaru couldn't initially fathom either. With Satella supposedly slumbering in a land far away to the east, the thought of her leaving her bones as a relic just didn't make sense to him, especially with her statement about how she wanted Subaru to kill her. That made him adamant that she couldn't be dead, leading to a visible panic at just the thought of it. Her words and his promise forced him to reject any possibility that Satella could be dead. That's when Al would interject, saying that it could be other witches, eventually leading to his subtle statement about Tifon. It was a name he didn't expect to hear coming from him, but one he hoped to inquire about if he ever got the opportunity. Given how cryptic he was when he said it, though, it was another instance where Subaru believed Al knew more than he was letting on. So he was very curious to know if the youthful girl he met was the same one Al was deep in thought about. If it was, then the thought of her demise being used as the foundation for this city really was rather unsettling. The rest of the meeting went pretty much the same, aside from a minor scene with Anastasia taking a hard stance against terrorism. Knowing the witch
I mean, good for her. Yes, yes.
cult would just kill them should they give in to their demands, she was pretty adamant about not negotiating with them at all. It made it so the only two options were to fight or flee.
We do not negotiate.
It was
with
then that
terrorists.
Garfiel would arrive with Mimi, leading to the flashback explaining how it all happened. A tragic turn of events starting, of course, with Capella. So, as she introduced both herself and her vivid disdain for humans, the unsettling nature of it all caused Mimi's smile to disappear. It made her carry an expression Garfiel knew didn't belong on her face, and for some reason that made him very uncomfortable. This was, of course,
They're
signed
so
to
cute
regroup
together,
with
then
Subaru and Amelia, but not before first encountering Liara. What happened next was a deep internal conflict between what he needed to do and what he wanted to do.
Garfiel.
You see, he was caught between fulfilling his duty to the Subaru and Amelia camp or helping his mother and the siblings he just recently discovered. It was a decision that brought into question who he was and everything he valued in life. Like, if he wasn't with Subaru and Amelia, then what use was he to them? At the same time, his two siblings were still technically his family, so it wouldn't be right to turn his back on them
Yeah,
either.
they're like half
So,
brothers.
what had
aren't
finally
they?
pushed Garfiel over the edge was Liara's pitiful attempt to convince him not to help.
Step.
After seeing
No.
just how hesitant Garfiel was, she
Wait,
quickly
is it step? Are they step brother, step sister? Is that how it works? Different dad. Yeah.
understood it wasn't right for her
I'm
to
sorry, I'm
ask him
stupid.
this. It was a reaction that reminded Garfiel of the day she left him. Just like how she did back then, she was clearly trying not to saddle others with duties they weren't obligated to take on. Heartfelt consideration that immediately made Garfiel's choice obvious. Of course, Garfiel knew he couldn't saddle Mimi with those obligations either, but as soon as he told her not to tag along, Mimi quickly made it clear that she was gonna help too. both were decisions Liara simply couldn't understand right now. Given how to her he was just a stranger, it didn't make sense why he would go so far for her. It was when she finally asked that the only answer Garfiel could give was that he was the Golden Tiger. That was all he said before jumping away to fulfill his promise.
I'm the
In
Golden
the end,
Tiger,
Garfiel knew
bitch.
putting off his duties was reckless, but what he found while doing so was that following his heart was easiest. Rather than wrestle with this incredibly tough decision now, he decided to instead focus on what was in front of him, then think through what had happened later. It was the way of fighting the Amelia faction had taught him. Why choose one when you can just take everything? Now, as for where the kids were, their lingering scent revealed they had gone to the park to see the songstress.
Makes sense.
This meant they were likely in a nearby shelter, one that in order to get to they first needed to pass City Hall, the location of Liara's husband and the center of Lust's operations. This presented Garfiel with yet another tough decision, since he could either ignore the man who stole his mother and go find his siblings, or try and save him and maintain his mother's newfound happy lifestyle. He was, after all, the one who saved her life. So, though Garfiel wasn't
He
connected
did a
to him
good
by blood,
thing.
he understood
He's a
the
good
impact
man.
of losing
He's a
Gallic
good
wasn't something he
man.
could just overlook. As someone who knew all too well himself, a blank space in the family was one that could never be filled. So, Garfiel being Garfiel decided right there that going for the source of the commotion was best. If he could beat Capella right now, then everything should resolve itself faster.
So let's go for the boss. Go straight away. Speed run. Let's go.
It was logic that made complete sense to Mimi, but at the same time had her intuition ringing all sorts of alarm bells.
She was
Garf
panicking.
knew he needed to be careful too, but based on what he knew about witches from his time in Sanctuary,
Oh, yeah,
when
of
it came
course.
to strength, he wasn't worried at all. Yes, he understood they had quite a bit of power, but from what he could tell about the one in Sanctuary, he honestly felt that she would never beat him in a contest of strength. It was a mindset that gave him confidence in
I'm
his
taking
ability to
down
fight
these
Lust.
witches.
So, after equipping his shields and gearing up,
Hey, just
that's
quickly, talking about witches. Has anyone been watching Agatha all along? I've been really enjoying that. There's only one episode left as well, and that last episode, episode 6, was so good. So good.
when him and Mimi would finally approach City Hall like how we saw in the anime. His plan was to overwhelm the enemy with speed and violence. He figured that this was the best approach since, from what he was told about Subaru's encounter with the witch cult in the past, the Archbishop's disciples weren't really anything to worry about.
God, just
Yes, there
Wilhelm
were quite
just
a few of them,
BAM!
but individually,
Decapitation.
each weren't very strong at all. They were a problem he figured he could just handle on the fly. What Garfiel came across instead, though, was a pair with an aura so incredibly hostile that just being in their presence was enough to understand these were masters who stepped
Yeah.
beyond the realm of mere
There's
mortals.
something about these two. 'Cause Wilhelm knows who this person is. Was it this person? Yeah, with the sword as well. And then this guy keeps growing arms. There's something going on there.
To compare them to an opponent we would understand ourselves, each was equal to, if not stronger than Elsa.
Oh, God.
They were enough of a threat to know facing them unprepared would be suicide.
Damn,
This was
that's
a
dangerous.
fact Garfiel fully understood, but getting himself to accept it was a completely different story. Reason being that, to him, they were nothing but a wall he needed to challenge and overcome. Since his strength was the only thing he had pride in, to turn tail and run after just losing in strength to Reinhardt, well, that was simply unacceptable to him. Now, the fight itself was relatively similar, but to highlight some of Garfiel's thoughts throughout, he was genuinely shocked by how light the lady was. When his foot made contact and pushed her away, he was thrown back by just how light she felt.
Oh, is that what that was about? Okay.
Garf's greediness would proceed to get the best of him, since where he thought he could at least take out one, instead turned into him getting jumped by both. He was bombarded by an onslaught of perfectly refined swordsmanship from the woman and crude heavy blows from the giant. One flowed like water through a river, while the other destroyed like a storm ravaging everything. It was a mind-numbing beatdown that Garfiel could barely keep up with. The only reason he was able to avoid death at all was because instinct alone helped him to parry the hits that would have been fatal. Everything else he just took head on. Now, something that really stood out to me after this was Elsa's line, which translated differently in the novel.
Oh, okay.
Rather than her saying she's gonna kill him, that love for Garfiel instead came from the fact he killed her. Or rather,
But you
will
are my
kill her.
first love.
Both didn't really make much sense to me, but what they represent is the invitation of death. Either way, the battle would continue with Mimi having to save Garfiel, eventually resulting in Mimi's injury.
Yeah,
They could
damn.
have gotten away had Garfield stuck to the plan, but because he was so caught up in trying to be the strongest, he would now have to face the direct consequences of his actions, the near death of the person who helped him cry. So, the moment Garfield realized that she was injured, he quickly found somewhere safe, then set her down so he could try and heal her himself. This was something he'd spent the last year learning, since if anything
Oh,
happened
cool,
to
yeah.
those from Sanctuary,
He wants to
he
be able to
wanted
help,
more
yeah.
than anything to be able to help them.
Sick.
It was for this
Oh,
reason he
Garfield's
put
so
his heart and
cool.
soul into learning healing magic, and this moment right here was about to prove his efforts. It was the exact situation that he'd been preparing for. When the wound he was treating didn't end up closing, though, despair and desperation overwhelmed him. All that time he'd spent learning how to treat wounds just like this was completely useless in the moment it mattered most. What should
I
have been an
tried so
opportunity to show
hard.
how far he'd come was instead turned into yet another failure.
Mate.
So, as he panicked more and started speaking his thoughts out loud, Garfield didn't even recognize the voice of the person talking anymore. It was so frail and weak that it couldn't be his. This was no time to wallow in his own despair, though, since what mattered now was saving her. If it meant giving his life in exchange for hers, that was something Garfield was ready to do in an instant.
Oh, mate, he's such a dude. He's going through so much.
He kept calling for a miracle as he jumped from rooftop to rooftop again, looking for anything or anyone that could help him. With not a soul in sight, though, the only thing Garfield could do now was rely on his senses. It was a last-ditch effort which would eventually lead him to the person he was looking for. The man that, to him, completely symbolized miracles.
Subaru.
He was the personification of hope in the most dire of situations.
Yeah.
So, if anyone was going to be able to save Mimi, the general in front of him was the person to do it. Now, the next part pretty much segues into the operation to retake City Hall, so I think right here is a good place to stop.
Okay.
You can expect that video in a few days or so, or you can come see me talk about it early over on my stream on Sunday. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope to see you at the next. Feel free to like and subscribe if you did. If you missed last episode, then you can watch that here, or if you want to watch Danmachi, then you can do so here.
Hey, the damn Magic Cook content was good.
But anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do.
So,
Until next time, ciao.
ciao. Very cool. Very awesome. Very interesting to see what was left out of the episode. And it's cool that he's going to be doing a second part. So we'll be on that when that comes out as well. The damn Magic Cook content, he said he's going to cover 2 episodes at a time. So intrigued to see if he's going to do 3 and 4. Because episode 4 was... like, wow, really cool, like, that ending as well, like, what's going on? But, yeah, awesome. Thank you to my patrons. If you want to have your name at the end of every video and want to be able to watch patron-only reactions to the original Dragon Ball series, link in the description to the Patreon page. $1 a month for the last help support channels, greatly appreciated, thank you for that, and thank you all for watching. What do you guys think of that? Guys, think of this, click like, subscribe if you haven't already. Leave comments down below. Let me know what I should watch and discuss in future videos. And so guys, all you guys, Nick Dam.